Well, hello, valued customer.
Hi, I brought this valued piece of paper that I got from my dad, who got it from his 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 dad, and so forth.
So did you want to pawn it or sell it?
I want to sell it.
Okay.
Well, I just want to sell it because I don't really know what it is, and it's just been sitting around in my house. So.
May I see this?
Yeah.
This looks like the letter of instructions that Samuel and William Vernon
Hey, that's my name!
wrote to Captain Godfrey during the time of the triangular trade.
Who's Captain Godfrey, and what's the triangular trade?
So, Captain Godfrey was a captain of the Vernon ship that sailed to West Africa to buy slaves, and the triangular trade was a business during the 1700s where slaves would work in the Caribbean to make sugar, to send to the colonies to make rum, and there, ships would sail to West Africa to trade slaves with that rum, and those slaves would be sent to the Caribbean to work or to the colonies to be sold.
Cool. So, what's this letter about?
Well, this letter is instructions for Captain Godfrey on what kind of slaves to buy and what to do with those slaves. For example, the Vernons specifically wanted young men as slaves because they were more stronger and more capable of doing work, and they didn't want older men as slaves because they'd be weaker and more resistant, while young men would be more obedient to white people. And the Vernons wanted to keep them in good health, to keep the slaves in good health because their profit depended on it, because they needed to sell them. And also to keep a watchful eye on them to prevent any possible uprisings or rebellions.
So, is there anything else I should know before settling a price?
Well, I know there's a lot more information about this document, so I'm going to call up one of my friends who's an expert on slavery, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hey, this girl brought in the letter that the Vernon brothers wrote to Captain Godfrey. I know you're an expert in this field, so do you want to come over to explain a little more about this?
Oh yeah, that sounds great. I'll come over. Yeah, I'm usually Nyah's go-to historian, and I can't wait to see what she has in store for me.
Oh, Krystin came!
Hi.
Abby, this is Krystin.
Hi, nice to meet you.
She's going to be talking a little more about the letter that you gave me.
Okay.
So this is a letter written by Samuel and William Vernon, and during that they were businessmen during the time of the triangular trade, and their business was active around that time.
Yeah, and what's important about them is that Samuel and William Vernon were actually the first Newport merchants to actually sell slaves in the southern colonies, specifically Charleston, South Carolina in 1755.
Yeah, and so he gave slaves to Henry Loring, and Henry Loring was a slave salesperson.
Yeah, and their father, Daniel Vernon, he was a very successful businessman back in London before he moved to the colonies.
Yeah, so even though this letter, they do suggest that the slaves were to be kept intact, like kept healthy, good condition, they really disobeyed that a lot during their time at the ships. So what happened was that on the ships, many of the women and men and children were physically and mentally abused. The men were kept in shackles, and they used to think of that as embarrassment because they couldn't revolt or they couldn't do anything to protect their families. The children actually everybody, if it wasn't raining outside, they would have them run for hours just for their own amusement and to keep them in health. And then also they were kept in very tight spaces, and because of these tight spaces, they had these buckets where they put their waste. So if it fell over and in that tight space, the scent would linger, and that would cause sickness as well. They also force-fed them as well. The food that they fed them was very gross. It looked like throw up on a plate almost. Yeah. And so what they did was that they force-fed them, and if they disobeyed, they get whip lashes and things like that, or if they refused to run, that was usually their punishment. If they tried to run away, or if they wanted to kill themselves or start a revolt, that would usually be their punishment. Or they'd be sent into a tighter space. So that was usually their life. But after a while, the government decided to change the laws for these. So what they did was that they increased the living space for the slaves, and they decrease the amount of slaves they put in the ships. But this wasn't for the slaves' health. It was actually for the crew's health. So how can I explain this? So the crew were also on the ship as well, and they had to go through the same conditions. So in order to help them be more healthy and come back safely without death, that's what they did. So it wasn't for the slaves. It was for the captain and his crew. So throughout all of this, the slaves are known as property. They weren't given any human consideration at all. There was no humanity in them, so that's what happened to them. They were very unkind.
So how much would you say this is worth?
Well, judging by the burns and its
Oh,
condition.
sorry, but that's not burns, it's coffee stains. There was a bump in the road and I was drinking coffee and
Well, due to those and its condition right now, I would say around $300.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Krystin.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the help.
So how much do you want for it? Well, like the lady said, I want 300 for it. How about a 100? How about 250?
How about 150?
Here, it's like a deal. $200.
I don't know. I guess
You got a deal.
Pleasure doing business with you. I'll meet you around the back.
I'm really glad I got $200 today. And it's definitely a little bit more because, I can burn it with the game. But, I'll just spend it on some jewelry and clothes and hopefully I can get some good stuff.
it's not money. It's supposed to say 200, but Nyah just said that the zero kind of wiped off, so.